is Norm Volsky, your host, and this is the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast.
Thanks, Norm. It's an honor to be here, and it's been fun to work with you over the years.
Hello, and welcome to the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast with your host, Norm Volsky. And when we began this podcast, my wish list of guests was a long one. I would have to say the guest today was at the top of the list. Would love to welcome Glen Tullman to the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast.
Great. I didn't bring my boxing gloves, but I'm happy to be here with you, Norm.
Well, from all of that I've heard, you stay in excellent shape. I would not want to get into a ring with you. But Glen, we love having you on the podcast. I doubt there's anyone watching this that doesn't know Glen, but for anyone living under a rock, Glen is CEO of Transcarent, a company that was most recently valued at $2.2 billion. We'll get into all the amazing things that Transcarent's doing. Prior to Transcarent, Glen was CEO of Livongo, helped them IPO, and ultimately at the peak during the merger with Teladoc was valued at $18.5 billion. And before that, he was CEO of Allscripts, took them to a multi-billion-dollar exit and IPO, and just generally a legend in the digital health space. So, Glen, couldn't think of anyone more deserving of being a guest on the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast than yourself.
Well, again, great to be here and look forward to our discussion today.
All right. So I'll hit you with a hard question to start. You're a healthcare guy. You started your career in the leather business. What brought you into healthcare, and why have you stayed in that market ever since?
Well, I think when you say I started my career in the leather business, you're referring to in literally before high school, I started making leather belts and things. And my mom I was growing up in New Jersey. My mom let me take the train into New York to try to sell this stuff. Probably be arrested for doing that with kids today, but she did it. That's what happens when you're the sixth of six kids. And that was one of my first selling endeavors long ago. The journey into healthcare really had to do with being in the software business and then making a trip back to my alma mater. And one of my professors kind of saying, you ought to do something more important with your life and make a difference. And that conversation really kind of caused me to pivot and focus my time and attention and most of my efforts on healthcare. So it was a great mentor, a great friend who caused me to pivot to say, you could really make a difference for a lot of people. And that's what my healthcare journey has really been about.
Well, there's probably a line of thousands, if not millions of people willing to thank that person for giving you that advice. So, we'd love him to get his acknowledgement if you're comfortable.
Sure. Well, that was a professor. He's subsequently passed away. His name is Doug Canlin, professor of animal behavior, and studied Japanese snow monkeys and Anubis baboons, and at a little school I went to for 3 years called Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. So again, we all talk about making an impact, and you can make an impact in anything you do. Teachers, coaches, they probably make some of the biggest impacts of anyone in our lives, but there's examples in every industry of people who figure out how to make a difference. And he surely made a difference for me and for a lot of other people. So grateful to him and many of the other mentors I've had. And it's taken a lot of folks to get me here, and I'm still not done. I still need a lot of work and a lot of help.
Well, I love that. What a legacy for your professor. So walk us through, you mentioned you were very entrepreneurial from the beginning of your life. You were, hawking belts in your mid-teens. What did some of those early sales experiences teach you and building a business, and how has that helped you now in running multi-billion-dollar companies?
I think it's less about kind of what I learned from early businesses. I was fortunate, my one of six kids, and my mother allowed each of us to explore, to kind of take advantage of our natural curiosity, to try a lot of different things. And, I think we are all born curious, and that is drummed out of us in schools and other things where people say, don't take a risk, don't do this. there's this crazy thing, this crazy word called failing. And, a lot of times people ask me in interviews like this, well, what's your greatest failure? And I say, I'm not sure I've ever failed. And they think
Uh-huh.
that's an arrogant statement. And it's really just an acknowledgement of a mindset that says, I haven't failed, but I learned a lot of lessons.
Yep.
I may have learned more than most people because I've tried more things. And so I think from when I was very young, we were encouraged in my family to try a lot of things. And if they didn't work, it wasn't a failure. It wasn't negative. It was just you learned a lot, didn't you?
Yep.
And that mindset makes you less scared about trying new things. And today, more than ever, we need to breed into our employees, our friends, our children, that willingness to experiment, to try. I think Einstein said something like, I have no special talent. I'm just passionately curious.
Mhm.
And I really believe that. Edison said, I never failed. I found 1,000 ways that wouldn't work
Mhm.
before he invented the light bulb. So, this sense of just trying new things, and particularly the bets may get bigger, but whether you love or don't love Elon Musk, I
Mhm.
mean, the one thing he's done in a variety of industries is he's experimented, he's tried things, and he's failed at some things. But the first two or three rockets he sent up exploded, but he didn't
Mhm.
see those as failures. He saw those as learning attempts. So again, I think that's really what it was. Less so any one business, and you can learn in a lot of ways. Doing business is one, going to
Mhm.
school is one, reading is one,
Mhm.
and watching is just being a part of things, joining in.
Well, what you just shared hit a chord because, I'm a newish father. I have a 2.5-year-old, Mila. We have a 2.5-month-old, Zev. And, I think the thing I'm trying to encourage them more than anything, obviously Mila more than Zev. I don't think Zev understands much these days yet, but is trying, like encouraging children to try and acknowledging and celebrating trying, not the end result. Like that has been ingrained in me. My parents did a great job of that. I think my sisters do a great job with their kids of that. And I think that is ultimately the most important thing a parent, can do other than love their children is encourage them to try and encourage them that like, hey, effort is great. The end result isn't always the most important thing.
Right.
And it's kind of not that way unless you really make an effort, to change, how kids are taught these days.
Yeah, that's right. Congratulations on Zev. I did not know.
Yeah.
Awesome. I knew about Mila, and I think you have is it a lab, if I
Oh
remember?
yeah, we got Luna and Molly,
Luna.
my wife, is like,
Yeah.
the perfect wife and she makes sure everything runs on schedule. So yeah,
Awesome.
no, it's a blessed life. I definitely am knocking on wood every chance I can get. So let's jump into Allscripts. I think Allscripts, like, at least for me, as long as I've been in the industry, like that put you on the map for sure. Like the name Glen Tullman, when I think of it, I'm like, okay, like I remember what he did at Allscripts and then everything else since. Kind of walk me through what it was like building Allscripts from a very small company to a company that IPO'd that was competing with behemoths like Cerner and Epic and others.
Well, I think if you go back to the beginning, and there's a great Harvard Business School case written about it, Allscripts, when I arrived, was a Series J preferred. So, for those of your listeners who aren't familiar with those terms, when you start a company, you start it generally with your own money and you run out of the money and you go out to investors and you say, I want you to put money in and you will be more preferred even than me. You will
Mm-hmm.
be Series A preferred. And then you run out of that money and you go to other investors or maybe the same ones and you say, you're going to be more preferred than even the Series A, you're Series B preferred. Well, by the
Yeah.
time you get to J, you have a lot of unhappy people and
Yeah.
you burn through a lot of money. And that's when I
Mm-hmm.
arrived at Allscripts. And Allscripts at the time did two things. It had a small PBM or pharmacy benefit manager, and it did medication dispensing. in physicians' offices. So I arrived, it was out of money. We let, I think of the 50 employees there were, I think we let 45 go, and we decided to make a big pivot. We sold the only profitable part of the business, the PBM, and we pivoted to go into something which at the time was brand new called electronic prescribing. Now, it had been done, it had just never been done at scale. And it had never been done in physician offices. So that was the initial pivot and the initial takeoff of the business. And we did it in two ways. We did it to say, not only can a physician electronically prescribe in her or in his office, but they can give you the medication right there. And that would be really optimal, more convenient. You don't have to worry, will the patient pick up the medication? You don't have to worry they're given the wrong one. It's completely confidential. And last but not least, if you have questions, you're right there with the caregiver, with the physician. So for a variety of reasons, in-office dispensing didn't catch on, although it's kind of come back in some ways. But what did catch on was electronic prescribing. And we knew that we could do checks and verifications, drug-to-drug interaction, drug-to-pregnancy, drug-to-weight, and we could save a lot of lives, and that's what we did. So we started to roll out electronic prescribing, and that was as is every change in most businesses, that was a struggle because physicians said, I can just take out this little script pad and do it faster than your computer. But they couldn't do it safer, and they couldn't do renewals, and so we fought that battle for a number of years. And I remember when I left, they gave me a plaque, and it was a memo I'd written, and I said, our goal is 100,000 electronic prescriptions. And someone had written, just don't tie our bonuses to it with a smiley face. Well, I did tie our bonuses to it. We didn't make 100,000 prescriptions. And years later, this is the value of paper, somebody had kept that memo and they gave it to me on a plaque, and it said, you still owe us the bonuses, but congratulations on, I forget the number, 500 million electronic prescriptions. So it had become the standard and saved a lot of lives along the way. Now, once we did that, physicians started to say, well, since I have this little device in my hand, can I also do billing? Can I also capture charges? Can I also dictate? So we started to acquire other companies that were best of breed,
like
put them on this platform, and we ended up building what was a stealth electronic medical record. Now, what's fascinating is everybody had said electronic medical records don't work. But we had one that was built, and you mentioned competing with the big companies at the time, Cerner and Epic. But in fact, we didn't. We were in offices. 50,000 offices used Allscripts, but we weren't in the hospitals. And the difference was we had built a very usable system for a simple reason. If it didn't work, our clients, small physician offices, didn't pay us. So we were incredibly responsive. We made it easier for physicians to do their jobs, and that was great. Fast forward to the hospital, the buyer was a CFO. It was all about billing, and in fact, to this day, electronic health records have made physicians' jobs harder, not easier. And of course, Epic, which is kind of a textbook case of how not to build a user-friendly system, was so bad that they literally created a new category called a scribe that would help a physician use the system because it was so slow and so hard to use. And if you think about software, imagine if Google was like that we all had to get somebody to help us use it, or Uber, or any app we use. It is, in fact, the only piece of software I think I know of that requires a third party to use it so the consumer can actually get value from it. That said, Allscripts was really about empowering physicians outside the four walls of the hospital. We eventually ended up making an acquisition of
That was
Eclipsys.
Eclipsys, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And great software, but for a variety of reasons, that didn't go forward. We didn't have full board support, and it got a little messy along the way. But to this day, one of the things, and I hope that, our next president has the foresight to make all electronic, what we now call and what Allscripts named electronic health records, to make all of them interoperable, which should be, since the government funded most of that through the High Tech Act, the government made one mistake, and that was not making a requirement that they be interoperable. So that was kind of the history of Allscripts.
I love it. All of it makes sense except for why you accepted the job in the first place. Didn't sound all that appealing, but everything else after, there's obviously no regrets.
Yeah, I think really it was this opportunity to go and do something that really did have an impact for people. And that's what it was, just at the right pivot point at the right time. I was ready to leave my earlier job where I was president and COO and take a CEO role. And it worked, and the rest, I guess, is history.
That's great. So, I think a lot of people know the Livongo story. You've told it thousands of times. I've probably told it hundreds of times in finding you guys some great candidates over the years. But kind of walk us through like the original, hey, I'm moving on from Allscripts. This is what I want to do next. How did it all play out? And, how did it become what we all know it is today?
Yeah, I think this was really interesting from that standpoint. It was, a time where it was the right time for me to leave Allscripts. I think the company had lost its sense of direction. For sure, the board had lost its sense of direction, and it wasn't fun anymore. And I think, life is too short not to do things that are both meaningful and fun. Yep. And so I had spent some time with my longtime business partner, Lee Shapiro, brainstorming about what would be next. We created a fund called Seven Wire Ventures, but fundamentally, I'm an operator. I like to build things. I like to run things. And I also took a trip out to California and met up with someone we had invested with, Hemant Taneja, who was at the time a partner at General Catalyst. And we started to look at companies, and he said, look, I really want to do something together with you and Lee. And we looked at company after company, and either they had great technology but didn't understand healthcare, or they understood healthcare and didn't understand technology. And we said, we've got to figure out a way to put these two things together. And so that was kind of the underlying piece of it. And then right around that time, my son had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I saw how hard we made it for people who just wanted to be healthy, how hard we made it for them to stay healthy. And I said, this is just ridiculous. And my son was fortunate to have resources. Imagine as I became more and more involved with what was then called JDRF, which has now just changed its name to Impact T1D. I said there has to be a better way. Well, I was approached by an entrepreneur who had a company who had great technology and said, I think you're the person to run this. And with a lot of encouragement from Lee Shapiro, I went on and he said, look, you care about this more than anybody. And you understand it very personally. So this is more than a business to you. This is something very different. And so that was really the founding story. Lee and Seven Wire Ventures put up the first money. And then later, not long thereafter, General Catalyst came in and we began to build the business. And we were able to do something very unique. It's interesting. A lot of people talk about the $18.6 billion exit as being the largest in digital health, one of the largest in history, period. And But if you talk to people from the company, they talk about impacting the lives of 1 million people. And every day, even to this day, 1 million people, including my youngest son, wake up healthier because of Livongo. And it did something that no one in digital health had been able to do before. That was create an experience that people didn't just like, they actually loved.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, we could prove we made populations healthier. And, you know, in a lot of healthcare, it's tough to do. In diabetes, you have a starting A1C and a starting blood sugar level. And 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year later, you can see if that number has gone down, they are healthier.
Yep.
And last but not least, we did it at half the cost. And people were just astounded that this worked. And they were astounded that you could create a healthcare experience that people love. And I kind of joke about this in a bad sort of way, but if you survey America today, what you find is that men and women, young people and old people, and people across all different ethnicities agree that healthcare is more confusing, more complex, more costly than ever before, and it's getting worse, not better.
Yeah.
And so in that environment where people are saying they're frustrated with their healthcare, they don't understand it, it costs too much, to create Livongo was pretty magical.
Yeah, it's a very, fond time for a lot of people I know. There are dozens of people I would consider friends that worked for you there. And, I still talk to these people several times a year, and many of them say, like, I've never had as much fun since, and I've never been somewhere where I feel so strongly about the mission since. A lot of people are trying to find that magic again. And it was like the most fun they've ever had in their careers. The hardest they've ever worked in their careers, but also the most fun. So
I think, our goal was we wanted it, and I've always said this, it's our objective at Transcarent. We want this to be the best place you've ever worked. And I think we accomplished that at Livongo. The unfortunate thing is some people who you've talked to, and you helped us build the company. Thank you for finding great people for us. But
thanks for the opportunity. It definitely is up to my reputation in the market. And, I have the platform today because Jim personally believed in me that I could build out his commercial team. So
yeah,
shout out to Jim.
Well, Jim, awesome. Again, a lot of incredible people. And of course, Jim is now over at Hinge, and so many of our people are around the industry now. I love the fact that our first two CEOs out of Livongo, both women, both running companies worth more than $500 million. Just a terrific legacy there. But, our goal is always, we want this to be the best place that someone has ever worked. The unfortunate thing is some people have said to me, I hope it's not the best place I ever work. And I know at Transcarent, that's our goal, to create that same, not the exact same culture. You should never try to do that, but those same values, that same sense of work incredibly hard, care a lot. And I say to people, look, I can't guarantee you we'll never make a mistake to our clients. But I can guarantee you no one will work harder and no one will care more than our people. And I really believe that. And that starts with me. I mean, this isn't.
I've heard about the lack of sleep you operate under. I couldn't do it, but, I've heard the legend.
It's not, look, again, this is about if you're doing something important. And a lot of people talk about work-life balance, and I don't agree with it. I don't understand it. And the reason is it seems to imply that work is not good and life is good and you've got to balance those. And everything I do, I love doing. I love work because I'm meeting great people. You mentioned Jim Pursley, but there's 25 people like Jim Pursley who are so great and so much fun. So there's that. You meet great people. You're doing great things. You're making a difference for people, changing lives. And you're having fun doing it, because we like to say that we take our work seriously, but we don't take ourselves very seriously.
Yeah.
And the number of pranks that Jim played on me and I played on Jim and we played on lots of others. Or
Well, I'm
that's
sure
kind of legendary.
Randy and Jason and that whole crew were full of them.
And again, there's no reason that we can't do hard work, good work, and also have fun doing it with
Yep.
great people.
That's fantastic. You've been ultra successful. You're like one of the most successful business people, in the country. Walk us through your guiding principles. Like, what are the things that you live by, ethics and values that you think separated yourself from the pack?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. And, the first thing I'd say is, look, no one does this by themselves. And so it's about the people you surround yourself with, their values, their commitment, their work ethic. You've named a few of those folks, but we were blessed with an incredible team of people. And I'm very thankful to have worked with them. Second, I don't ever look back. I had that advice from John Doerr early in a conversation when Kleiner Perkins was investing. He said to me, Glenn, you've done such great things and everything. And my chest was kind of puffing out and I was feeling good. And he said, none of that means anything to us. I said, I'm sorry. And he said, we're investing in the future, not the past. So, let's focus on the future. And that was people say that, well, that was pretty nasty. No, that was great advice.
Yeah.
And I don't ever look like what you did. And some people say, why would you do this again? It's like, because I love making a difference. But you ask about values, and first and foremost, from when I was young, my mom instilled in us this sense of something a little bigger than us. It was never about us.
Mm-hmm.
It was about, in the Jewish space, something called tikkun olam, improving the world.
I'm very familiar with that. You can see my necklace. I've got a chai and a
there we go.
version of a
So,
chamsa myself.
There we go. But so that there was, to whom much is given, much is expected. And those were real principles about the way you live your life. So again, that was important. It's about making a difference. If you're going to work hard, do it for something that matters. And by the way, look, I do things at scale, but I admire people who are great chefs, who are great teachers, as we mentioned earlier, who are, the policemen and military who protect us and allow us to live this great life we live. And so it's all over about people who make a difference. So that's one. And giving back, look, there's nothing better than giving back. So those are the kind of values. It's about putting people first and also helping people succeed. I measure a lot of things. That's a true part of what people say about me. And I measure the number of people I talk to every day. And that includes family. And some people say, you have to measure family. Yeah, you know what? If you don't, guess what? Guess what gets left out? Yeah. So if it's important, you measure it. And staying in touch, really important. Family, friends, but your clients, don't forget them. These are all friends. There's no separation for me. So, but one of the things I measure is the number of CEOs that we've worked with. And that number is now 36. So there's 36 folks.
Transcarent?
No, who worked for me who are now CEOs.
CEOs that you've, kind of like come from your family tree. That's an incredible legacy. And continuing to increase.
Now, the fun part about that is, just so you don't think that's in any way arrogant, what they learned is what not to do by watching me and others. And so they saw us make what some people would say
they
were
learned
mistakes.
A lot of things to do, but maybe a few things they don't want to do.
Well, but there's nothing like, you can call it a failure or a mistake, or you can call it experience. Yeah. And what they learned was, here's some things. Oh, no, we tried that. That didn't work. And they laugh about it. And that's experience. So seeing people succeed, super important. So those are their simple values, and anybody can embrace them, and then you got to live them. And, that's what it's about.
I love that. So whether it's an entrepreneur who's starting a business or, later in your career, you started to build a fund with Lee and others, Seven Wire, which has been ultra successful. And whether it's starting a company or investing in a company, you got to believe in product market fit. Like if you don't have that, you're probably not writing the check. You're probably not taking the risk. So my question is, at what point in Livongo's growth did you decide employer is the channel? Like that is where we're going to start spending our time. Obviously, eventually you hired Michael Sturmer and you started really building out the health plan. You created just a great commercial engine, but like, how did it start an employer?
Yep, we had to find somebody who could actually realize the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge of healthcare, one, you have to navigate some pretty treacherous pathways because a lot of people make money by not doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one. And two, what we knew is self-insured employers were the most likely to directly benefit. So
Mm-hmm.
if we could change the experience for their people, because when their people were unhappy, who hears about it? They do, not the
Mm-hmm.
health plan, the self-insured employer. So one, experience matters. When it's your family, your employees, you hear about it. Second, in terms of actually taking care of the people. So, the number of things that happen because somebody in a company, some executive, their son or daughter, their husband or wife, their parents get sick, and all of a sudden the policy gets changed.
Yeah.
So it's personal. Healthcare is personal. And last but not least, the dollars matter. So all three of those things, the other thing is if you go to direct to consumer, it's very expensive. But if I walk into, one of our great companies, an Allstate or a UPS or a
Mm-hmm.
Costco, all those are customers of ours. All of a sudden, I can sign up 10,000 people in
Yep.
one call versus selling individually. So for those reasons, that's become a real channel. And I think it's become a channel for digital health as well,
Yeah.
because all you need to do is convince one person that this makes a difference. And if they know somebody in their place, they can get very direct feedback. And, again, the number of stories, the number of people who to this day walk up to me and hug me and say, "You changed my life at Livongo." And because you gave me the freedom, you made it affordable. And there's a whole long list of things that we did. So that's why the employer channel has been so valuable to us.
Mm-hmm.
Employers care. It's also why we have to fix this. Right
Yeah.
now, healthcare in America is making our employers, large and small, uncompetitive. And we have to get back to where healthcare is affordable, but
Mm-hmm.
no one can sustain 8, 10, 12% increase a year.
Yeah.
It's just not sustainable. So that's why when I look at the business prospect for Transcarent, if you thought Livongo was impactful and large, just wait
This is at
because
scale. Like this,
this
you did it
is
in one defined area, a couple others, mental health and cardiovascular, and some other areas. Like now it's like, hey, let's make healthcare cheaper and accessible for anyone dealing with any
exactly,
condition or any issue.
exactly.
So it's, very exciting to work with you. I'm going to make a very embarrassing admission. When I first met Jim and, we were going back and forth, I thought Livongo sold to hospitals. I'm like, who would be crazy enough to IPO a company for 4 billion and then sell into a different buyer, like not leverage all those relationships. So when he reached out, he's like, "Hey, I need employer salespeople." I was like, "What's that?" You're gonna have to explain that one to me. And then we figured it out together. But I'm very appreciative of you guys giving me a shot. Talk to me a little bit about how the market has changed. Like when you at Livongo started selling to employers, it wasn't as crowded as it is now. What are the challenges that even if what Transcarent does makes just too much logical sense not to implement, like what's been the cause for it kind of developing slower than anyone would want or expect?
I guess I'd say a few things. One, Livongo kind of led the way as a point solution, if you will, albeit a growing point solution. So started with diabetes, then added hypertension, then behavioral health, et cetera. And a lot of people said, well, we could do this. And even some of our own people went off. Naomi Allen went off and said, one of my children has a challenge and I'm trying to get it solved in the behavioral health area, and there's nothing there. And she went off and solved that problem. I'm so proud of Brightline and what she's done there.
We work with them as well. I
Yep,
love working with people who work like you guys. It's great.
So, that's just one example. People all of a sudden said, this is real. And the validation was you could make money, you could take companies public, you could do this. And so that happened, and it happened so much that today we're at a point where there is kind of point solution exhaustion. So in every market, there's a flow, and you got to understand the flow, and you got to go at the right point. So part of the reason that Transcarent is having so much success right now is that, people are saying, I want one place for all my health and care. And here's what it is. It's their phone, which happens to be the one place for everything else we do. And we used to say
how much screen time I have a day.
Yeah, but think about, what we've done in every area. You're dependent on that, whether it's, Amazon or Uber or Spotify or on and on.
Or your banking. Every industry has leveraged it, other than, healthcare is just a little bit behind.
Exactly. And so that's the idea, is imagine if you had one place for all your health and care. Well, today, that's what we have with Transcarent. And the challenge is now you have to go in, and just like we did at Allscripts, just like we did at Livongo, at Livongo, I think you probably remember, but, we went public and no one knew. They said, are you strips and meters? Are you diabetes or are you hypertension? You got to choose one. And I kept saying, we're not going to choose one. And people would say, are you coaching or are you equipment? What are you? And then we went public, and we had tech investors and healthcare investors, and both of them kind of deserted us. And they said, oh, I think that's health. I think that's tech. It wasn't health tech. And so all of a sudden the stock dropped down. Everybody said, oh my God, what's going on? And I kept saying, and Lee Shapiro, who was our CFO at the time, said, he would say at the beginning of every meeting, you are not your stock price. Whether it goes up or down, it doesn't matter. We're building a business. And we kept focused. But it would be like saying, and by the way, I have above my desk at home the quote where someone said to Jeff Bezos, you ought to stick to books. That's what you're good at. This idea of the everything store makes no sense. So in a similar way, we're at this moment, and it's all about timing and getting the moment right, where everybody is longing for saying, give me an experience that's great, that's one place for all my health and care. And that happens to be the vision that we have at Transcarent. And, our mission is, how do we make it easy for people to access high quality, affordable care? Now, that word easy is important because when I first moved out to Silicon Valley, people said, well, I don't understand healthcare. You keep trying to force people to do stuff. You keep trying to bribe them to do stuff. Why don't you just build a good app and make it easy for them?
That's simple.
But it was really true. It's like I thought about it and I said, yeah, imagine just making it easy. So imagine if I could say to you, Norm, and I can today, talk to a doctor in 60 seconds. Well, nobody, not Teladoc, not MD Live, nobody can do that. And we do that today for lots of big customers. 60 seconds, you're accessing a physician 24 hours a day. And you, with young children, know when something goes wrong, you're not waiting around for 15 minutes hoping somebody comes on the screen. And you don't need to meet a new friend. You just want an answer. So care in 60 seconds. Second, lowest cost prescription. And that matters for most of America. That is, where do I find the lowest cost? And we partner with GoodRx and with Mark Cuban. And you type in a name and we tell you the closest place to get it. Number three, if you need surgery, you want to know two things. what is the best surgeon to do it, and where's the best place to get it. Because if you have a good surgeon in a bad place or a bad surgeon in a good place, and most people don't have access to that. And then cancer care and weight health. Imagine if all that was instantly here, and imagine if you could ask, your phone anything, including, hey, is this covered by my benefits? So benefits navigation, number one. Number two, I need clinical guidance, what to do. And number three, I need to know where to go. So care delivery. Imagine if all that was in one place on your phone available. That's what's called wayfinding.
Yeah.
And that's what we've introduced. And, I always compare it to the sense of like when we had flip phones and then the iPhone came along, it wasn't just a better flip phone. It was wholly different. People say, well, is this another navigation system like Accolade or Quantum? And it's like, no. This is so different that you can't imagine it. The flip phone did one thing. The iPhone does everything. Navigation does one thing. You call a phone number. That's the first problem. You might have hundreds of good people waiting at the other line. Nobody wants to make a phone call. And then let's say they say, we'll give Jim Pursley some credit, you need to use Hinge or you need to use Sword. Well, what do? They give you a website and they give you a number to call. Well, why not call you? And if you compare that to wayfinding, we connect you directly. You're already in the site.
Yeah,
You're
it makes
there,
every investment a benefits manager or a health plan leader made, and it like increases adoption of everything they've already invested the resources into.
And anybody can use it, 100 different languages, 24 hours a day. And guess what? It's about a third of the cost of the current navigators. And it includes unlimited telehealth. And the only question is, you can use our wayfinding, you can use someone else's. I mean, this is a new category. It's not navigation, but you will do it differently. And it's like if I said to you, I have a really challenging question to answer. I'll give you two options. You can call the librarian, and I know her, and she's amazing and smart, and she has all the resources, or you can Google it. And you'd be like, is that really a question? I'm going to Google it. If I said you can call a really great dispatcher for a taxi or you can Uber. Okay, well, now you're going to say you can go to a navigator, talk to somebody in a call center somewhere, and they're really friendly and really good. Or you can use wayfinding and do it instantly, faster than you can make a call. And it'll be personalized to you. So this is a whole new generation that's coming. And, we've spent more than $100 million. I think it's going to be tough for people to catch up. And by the way, there's safety elements in there that when you really understand AI, and look, we were one of 3 companies to testify in front of Congress. We have an incredible guy, Dr. Benjamin Wynn, who leads
I saw him speak before. He's very impressive.
He's a physician. He's a data scientist. I mean, and he leads a team of people. But this is like ERX. This is transformational. 5 years from now, there'll only be one thing. It'll all be on your phone. You won't call anybody in a call center. You won't be on hold. And your expectation will be instant care, instant access. If you ask wayfinding, I need to know a endocrinologist in San Jose who speaks Spanish. It's there with a phone number and a place to dial. And, you can get in touch with him or her. And if it's really good, if it's at Rush in Chicago, you can schedule the appointment right then because of the great work we're doing with Rush, which is an amazing organization led by an amazing leader, Dr. Omar Latif.
I'm crossing my fingers you guys sell Anthem so I can get it myself. So can't wait. You did mention something that I kind of got a kick out of. You mentioned the flip phone analogy. And it didn't get a lot of critical acclaim, but there was a movie, I doubt you watch many movies, about BlackBerry and like how the BlackBerry phone like rose and then ultimately did
I
not
saw it.
sustain the success. And there was a meeting between that was depicted in the movie of the BlackBerry executives meeting with one of the big cell phone carriers, like Verizon or something. And they showed them like, hey, like Apple just came out with this iPhone, and they're like, oh, don't worry about that. Our users love clicking the buttons and hearing the click. And that's what they thought their moat was. Hey, like people love the BlackBerry so much, and no one's going to use that iPhone. And then a couple months later, I think their sales hit a cliff and took a nosedive. So, I definitely love that like you're always trying to innovate and see what's around the bend and not just do like, hey, what's the best version now and let's just do it a little better. You're trying to transform the entire market, which is really, really exciting. So, you said something that really struck a chord with me as well. You're like, hey, I've accomplished a lot in my career, but couldn't have been done without a lot of other great people. Talk to me about your philosophy about hiring great talent and nurturing that talent so that they blossom themselves and grow into bigger jobs and maybe even run companies after they've gotten that amount of experience. Just kind of walk me through like how you recruit and develop talent and make your companies really a culture that not only is able to retain the talent, but really be like a beacon of where talent wants to go.
Hmm. Well, first of all, just you were the one who said I accomplished a lot, not me.
Okay, fair enough.
But
Guilty as
but
charged.
because I think we're just getting started and we have a lot to do. And that said, in terms of talent and talent development, first and foremost, whether it be a CEO or anyone else, you got to understand the vision. And I think lots of people would say they've come to work at my companies, including Transcarent, because they believe in the vision. We don't
Hmm.
pay the highest salaries. We are generous with stock, but we don't pay the highest salaries for sure.
I can attest
And
to that.
so we watch our dollars, but people win with us, and that's important. So, but it starts with vision. People would tell you, well, we're here because we want to change healthcare. We want to make it better, and we want to be proud of what we do. So that's really
Yeah.
important. Number one. Number two, it takes a lot of energy. I mean, this isn't easy. It's never easy to change an industry, to be on the forefront. And so it takes a lot of energy. By the way, you can rebuild that energy by having fun, by laughing,
Yeah.
by enjoying it. But if not, it's a grind, and we don't want it to be a grind. We practice, you talk about developing people, we practice kind of radical honesty. And that is that, I will send people an email that is very direct, and I'll copy a bunch of other people. Now, there's a theory that says you correct in private and you praise in public. And we believe the opposite. I think if somebody makes a mistake and I said, hey, Norm, that's not the way to do it. Now, if I just said that to you quietly, you're the only one who
No one
learned.
else learns.
Exactly. But if I say, hey, look, Norm did this did not work. Now, it's not the best day in the world for you. You don't like to be held up, but you know what? You're a big guy and you
Mhm.
learn to have a strong core, but a soft shell. And so you're like, oh yeah, that's Glenn. I screwed up. Get used to it. Like, so what, we all do. Tomorrow
Mhm.
it's someone else's turn. We
Are they
learn
allowed to
together.
send that email with you copied?
Yeah, absolutely. By the
As
way,
long
and
as it goes both ways, it's fair.
people do that all the time. They correct me all the time. And it's kind of almost a joke
Mhm.
about how many things I say that are wrong, but I'm surrounded by people who constantly fix them.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've sometimes joked that the reason I make so many mistakes is to make other people careful, or other people willing to go out on a limb because they know it's okay.
Yep.
And that is the culture. So, but the flip side of that is we just had a board meeting yesterday. All of my direct reports attend the board meeting, the entire board meeting.
Mhm.
And I want them there because I want them to hear what the board says. I want them to learn what it's like to deal with board members. I want them to feel the
Mhm.
pressure of talking to our chairman, Ken Frazier, who is the nicest guy in the world, but also, ran Merck. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
you
the
can be a
real
really
deal.
good guy or a good woman and also have high standards and high expectations. Like
Exactly.
those are not
Exactly.
like one or the other.
And we set, lofty goals, and we have a lot of, no is the beginning of a conversation at our place, and we
Hmm.
challenge people. And that is tough, especially, some days I feel like I'm managing the Yankees. I have all these superstars and I got to make sure they don't kill each other because people aren't used to being given real feedback.
Hmm.
One of the tips I would give everybody,
And
and
that's society. Like society doesn't
oh
like
yeah,
direct communication and conflict. It actually tries to avoid it at all costs. And I think it's one of the most poisonous things in our society.
well, when you do that, what happens is rather than having some conflict, you get what we have today, which is major blowups. I last night was lucky enough to listen to Fareed Zakaria, and one of the things he was talking about was a very contentious issue, abortion. And he made this statement, and it was quite brilliant. And he said, "Look, the reason that abortion became such an issue is because we put a federal ban on it. Had we let the states handle it, some states would do more, some states would do
Hmm.
less, but everybody would feel like they at least were heard."
Hmm.
And by not doing that, we created a whole movement that ended up influencing the presidency and everything else instead of
Hmm.
saying, look, we'll work through these things,
Yeah.
and we'll work through them in a unique way. So similarly, and by the way, you mentioned your new son and your daughter, and like I like to say after everything I do, I say to people, "How'd I do?" And of course, the proverbial, "You did great." And I said, "That's not helpful. What could I have done better?" And they,
Yes.
"No, no, no, you did great." No, no, that's not. You're not helping me. Tell me how I could have gotten better. Now, my long-term business partner, Lee Shapiro, he started a habit years ago. And after every time I speak, every meeting, he gives me a list of things I did wrong, said wrong. And it's really irritating. And it's really helpful.
That's a good friend.
Yeah, and it is. And so, I think the other thing is there is a difference between some people say we celebrate our failures. No, you shouldn't celebrate your failures. That's silly. Okay. You shouldn't punish people for failing as long
Hmm.
as they don't keep failing. But there's a difference between winning and losing. My kids used to come home and they'd say to their mom, "How'd I do?" And she'd say, "You did great." And they said, "Dad, how'd I really do?" And I
Yeah.
tell them, it wasn't always a good thing, but they got to understand that that's, you need to know that
Hmm.
there's a difference between winning and losing should hurt. And
It's
so
certainly
it's not,
not fun. And what
yeah.
I've told people, you talk about data, I've talked to tens of thousands of people about guiding them in their career. And, when people make a job move, there's a lot of factors: title, responsibility, all these different things, compensation. I tell people at the end of the day, what's going to be most impactful on your happiness is, do you feel like you're winning? And if you don't feel like you're winning, it's going to feel very empty. And that's the nice thing about when I do recruiting for companies, like Livongo, like Transcarent, like Hinge for that matter. I'm like, hey, every job's hard, nowhere's perfect, but you're going to feel like you're going to win. And you are winning because the leadership and the mission and all those things that you don't have to worry about. And that
I think
lets me
it's
sleep at
about,
night easy when I work with great companies and great leaders. So,
yeah, and that's what I would say. The other thing is the people you work with. If you work with great people, you're going to feel great, and they're going to be great days, and they're going to be challenging days you have to work through. But those people will always be the people, and that's
mhm,
what's really important. But I think people get, it's having going to work at a place where you're going to work with great people, you're going to be given challenging assignments. I mean, the number of people who have said to me, "I never really thought we could do this," and we did it.
mhm,
And that's, what you don't want is, you accomplish your objective and it doesn't mean anything. If we said, well, our goal is we just want to have 100,000 people use electronic prescribing and that was it, and then we did it, and then what? Versus saying, no, we're going to change the world here, and we're going to make the world safer for everybody. And that was a very big difference.
Well, Glenn, I know time is a very rare commodity for you, so I appreciate you coming on the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast. I think for all of our listeners, like this is one to listen to because this is a winner, and I think there's a lot we all can learn from Glenn. And again, Glenn, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything you've done for really the whole digital health industry, and can't wait to see what you and your team at Transcarent just continue to accomplish.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for joining. Thank you for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe below if you enjoyed it.